£1,000 annually to spend on conservation, which is a farce by any standards. And of course, it's even more ironic when you think that, you know, we might even have to be going to London to buy back these pieces of our buildings.
Seven visual essays from around the world. Traveller's Tales, a new series on 4, starts tomorrow at 9 with a journey into the land of Oz.
Michael Heseltine talks about the events that have shaped his life from childhood to notoriety as a mace-swinging politician. And what about the future? Does he still have eyes for number 10? Pursuit of Power, next, here on 4. New for Tuesday, the Literary Island.
This dark soil is heavy, really, with history, with old sins, old battles.
Writers talk about the influence of the British landscape.
Everything dirty went into the river. Everything dead went into the river.
I'm confronted with that sense of loss, of a life or a history once never had.
It's a marvellously fertile ground for imagination.
Melvin Bragg discovers Britain, the Literary Island, Tuesday at 8:30 on 4.
Every 7 seconds, somebody somewhere opens an insurance policy with Eagle Star. Eagle Star covers your world. Individual bites of biscuit, caramel and raisin, all covered in swirling Cadbury's milk chocolate. Why rush when you can stroll? Take life in your stride with new Cadbury Strollers.
If you're tempted by a car with a little more flavour, this one's irresistible. The Renault 19.
For sale, weekend home with views across the South Downs and the Yorkshire Dales. Excellent sailing and golf. Hot running water, cold running water. Good fishing, home cooking, friendly neighbours, large back garden. When you own a caravan, great weekends and holidays are round the corner. Just get up and go. For a free guide, ask your dealer.
Under test conditions, a stunt driver puts Continental tyres through their paces. Just how good are German-engineered tyres? Continental tyres. German engineering where you need it most on a car.
Oldrids' gigantic summer sale. Hundreds of bargains at both in-town and downtown Boston. Oldrids' gigantic summer sale is now on. Don't miss it.
Hi, lads. Hi, George.
How do, Ken?
Sorry I'm late. Hello, Ken. Got stuck with my accountant. New ways of saving me tax.
Here, take a look at this lot.
Of course, you'd have made sure your money's index-linked.
Come again.
Inflation-proof.
Inflation-proofing's one thing, Fred. Making money's another.
I'm talking about 4.5% on top of inflation, guaranteed over 5 years.
Where can you get a deal like that?
National savings certificates.
Index-linked savings certificates, the guaranteed way to beat inflation. Tax exempt.
You're in, Ken.
Hey, Ken. Better safe than sorry, lad.
New for tonight.
Time Signs, a series that shows you how to read the landscape of the past with the help of Mick Aston.
There's a ring found like this in Wedmore in Somerset recently. It's turned out to be Anglo-Saxon.
That's it, it's enough. Mom, you've got... That's enough.
I haven't got you anywhere.
I should have
contact lenses and it's going all into my contact lenses.
A Sense of Belonging, a series that gets under the skin of Jewish identity.
To do a practical skill, you know, is worse than marrying out, not being a lawyer.
New for tonight.
Now for the influences and experiences that have shaped the man behind the politician.
I was a small businessman in those days, and I have to tell you that I more or less worked myself out of a job before I went into politics, that was. And where I very successfully completed the process. I wanted to try and make myself financially independent before going into politics, and I had a very limited amount of capital. I had £1,000, which my grandparents had left me. And I was going to spend that £1,000 over the 3 years in which I was going to be articled as a chartered accountant. I realised if I did that, I wouldn't have my £1,000 left at the end. So I found somebody else who had £1,000, and together we bought a small house in which we sublet rooms. That meant that we had the asset and an income, and I was then articled as a chartered accountant in that 3-year period. Of course, what happened is that the value of the property went up, and we suddenly found that we'd doubled our money in about 18 months, something of that sort. So there was an element of, if you like, sort of innate caution about the spending of my limited capital, and a desire to be financially independent. That went on, and I worked hard, and I had some marvellous partners, and the luck went our way. Not always, but enough of the luck came our way. I did make myself financially independent. That was very important to me, particularly as it turned out later on. But it was always in my mind that I would go into politics. To that extent, there was a plan, there was a strategy. From that moment on, there has never been a plan or a strategy except to do whatever the Conservative Party asked me to do.
You had what some would say was an undistinguished school record.
I think it overstates it.
It overstates it. Right. I rather liked your school report, which says, has a certain spirit, but incorrigibly idle and very reluctant to do anything when told.
Oh, those are the more flattering remarks.
Why do you think, do you just dislike school?
They misjudged me. I have no doubt at all. They made very unfair, unkind misjudgments about me.
Now, you did have one handicap at school, which I suppose is carried on with you throughout your life, and that's obviously a sort of mild form of dyslexia. How serious a handicap was that at school?
Well, I find this very embarrassing. First of all, when I was at school, no one had ever heard of dyslexia. And it is perfectly true. I'm a slow reader. I don't absorb easily from the written word. But I'm embarrassed by the suggestion that it's a handicap, because if I dare make the point, hasn't been a handicap. And I've seen enough people who are genuinely handicapped by it. I've been invited to speak to small groups of people or meet children or talk to parents with their dyslexic children, and it is utterly and absolutely wrong to try and suggest that I'm in some way handicapped in the way that they are. And I always feel acutely embarrassed that people should feel that I wish to in any way suggest that I'm associated with that sort of genuine deprivation and hardship, which is a quite different source of concern.
You've learnt ways to overcome it, but I mean, obviously your ministerial, the way you work as a minister is probably rather different from your colleagues, because obviously, I mean, someone like Mrs. Thatcher just absorbed written briefs at the speed of lightning, and she spent all her time just ploughing through brief after brief, and I suppose a lot of your colleagues do that as well. That is not how you work, as I understand it.
It isn't often I haven't looked at the brief, but I don't find it the ultimate process. I like to see who's advising me, I like to listen to their arguments, I like to ask questions, and I find that that is a process of getting to the heart of the matter, reaching the essence of the decision you have to make, rather more effective than just ploughing through endless written documents. They have to be there, they are part of the process, and I do my share of it, but it's not the whole story.
Would you ever read a book, for instance, for pleasure?
Oh yes, yes. I read Corelli Barnett's The Audit of War on the beaches of some tropical clime on my last holiday.
Another of your school reports, I mean, it's most unfair to take you through them, but I mean, was that Michael Heseltine has his own ideas about most things. If he wants anything, he will get it, no matter how he does it. Rather a shrewd assessment, no?
I think that's a rather harsh judgment. I would argue that of course I work hard at what I'm asked to do, and whenever I've taken on something, I've tried to deliver results. I would hope within the rules of the game.
Oh, I didn't want to give that implication, but
I just thought that comment rather does give that impression.
I thought the determination and the application that.
Oh, certainly, I work hard. I certainly work hard, and I like to try and deliver what it is I'm expected to in the context of what I'm asked to do.
Where do these things come from? This determination, this application.
That is interesting because, of course, I knew both my grandfathers. Of course, obviously, my father very well. And I think looking back to the male side of my family, you can see a great deal of my personal characteristics coming through from the various qualities that they had. My mother is also a very determined lady, and I think that there's an element of my inheritance has come from her. So I think you can see it where it is. And there are parts of my background which are entrepreneurial that I think perhaps have come through in me. But equally, there are others that had a rather sort of determined, dedicated, sort of rugged determination to survive in certain of my backgrounds that seems to have come through.
Unlike most people, I think, and it's true of most politicians, I suppose, you had a game plan in life, and that's rather unusual, at least according to your biographer Julian Critchley.
My unauthorised biographer.
Your unauthorised biographer, who says, and correct me if he or I are wrong, that one day while at Oxford you jotted down on the back of a piece of paper precisely what you were going to do, and the 90s, against the 90s, was Prime Minister.
Nobody has the piece of paper. I have no memory of it. I'm not going to suggest for a minute that with Julian, who I knew extremely well at public school, Oxford College, that we didn't laugh together about what the future was to hold, and none of us could foresee it. But I have no recollection of this envelope. I have recollection of other envelopes, but not that particular one.
Do you see yourself as a very ambitious person?
Well, I think you have to think hard about what you mean by that. If you mean, is the whole purpose of what you're doing to get to the next stage, there's an element of that. Of course there is. But if you mean by it, which is the usual interpretation that comes somewhere close to it, that you're spending your life scheming and always trying to find ways of advancing yourself, that is, perhaps to my weakness, a part of me that doesn't exist. I'm not a schemer or a plotter, or I've never been in the business of advancing myself personally, other than by the delivery of what people asked me to do. I'd always believed rather naively, that if I delivered the task in hand, that would be of itself sufficient eloquence. Wasn't always the case.
You began off as a politician, as a student politician, obviously the rough school of Oxford University politics.
Yeah.
What did you learn from that?
Oh, it was the most stretching experience of my life. I adored Oxford. For years, when I drove, I used to go home to South Wales most weekends, I couldn't drive down the Oxford bypass. I had to drive through the city. I loved it so much. I loved the people, I loved the clash, I loved the exhilaration, the fact that one found oneself in that remarkable opportunity that represents the full university life. One, of course, competed within a peer group that were people that, well, I know today. Some of my lasting friends I found at Oxford.
You're known now as a terrific conference orator, but I'm told, at least according again to Critchley, in those days you began off very painfully. You weren't any good at all. You had to be, you went to a school, the Mrs. Gatehouse School,
yes,
to be, do you remember that well?
Oh, clearly. I think I was very shy and very nervous, and I had little confidence. Perhaps it had something to do with those school reports. There was an outside veneer of confidence, but there wasn't an inner confidence. And I think what they say is true about my speaking, particularly in the Oxford Union. It got better, but it was never of the quality of people that I regarded as doing well at Oxford. I think I was better on the party platform, because there the competition was less, the challenge was less, the nervousness much lower, and so I began to find my own capacity to communicate very much, I think, within that rather narrower opportunity. We did have these classes where we all used to get up and bang on for about 3 minutes and then criticize each other. That was a part of just learning the rudiments of the technique of speaking, but it's not about public oratory. I mean, you learn to, this is what I'm going to say, I'm now saying it, this is what I've said, and I'm now going to sit down. I mean, the rules of speaking. But I think it was later, as I got more experienced and as I got more confident, that the reputation to which you refer began to develop.
When you speak now, do you still get very nervous?
On big occasions.
On conference?
House of Commons, conference, certainly.
Which is the worst forum as far as you're concerned?
House of Commons.
Why is that?
Well, the conference is of its nature on your side. They hope you will do well. They want you to do well. And if you do well, they will encourage you in doing well. The House of Commons is the role of the gladiator. You're in the ring, and there's a competition and challenge, and the principal interest of most of, well, at least getting on for half the people there is that you shouldn't do well. They want to stop you doing well. They want to trip you up. They want to embarrass you, whatever they can, to stop you doing well. But if you can break through in the House of Commons, it is, in my view, without doubt, the greatest achievement in terms of public communication.
Does religion play any part in your politics?
I think I've described myself as sort of anxious to be converted Christian. If that's not a contradiction in terms, I think the church is in a terrible mess, and I certainly could never subscribe to the view that the sort of God they talk about, all wise, all seeing, could believe in the sort of the trivia of the manifestations of his religion on earth. But I think I do subscribe to the sort of the Christian ethic. And I hope very much that in the life that I lead, within all the frailties that all of us have, one is motivated by things that one could defend at the last trial, so to speak.
Do you see the church as perhaps a political force?
Much less than it should be. I'm not one of those who thinks that the church should or could keep out of politics. I don't know how you can have great moral beliefs and keep out of politics. But of course it's perfectly true that if the church becomes involved in politics and is in any sense party political, then it will have to take as good as it gives. I don't mind that. I think that it's in some senses a sign of the decline in influence of the church, that it isn't more articulate about the great issues of the day. I've never minded. Some people do mind. They think they should stand apart. But I think you can't expect the church to show great leadership if it isn't clear and articulate about its views on how the moral dimension interfaces with the policy of the time.
But your religious beliefs, such as they are, they don't actually influence your political views.
Well, no, I think they must do, because if I have any beliefs, if I have any sense of morality, it's bound to influence the way in which I conceive of policy and the way in which I try to deliver political results. It must do, because you are what you are.
I just wondered whether you didn't divorce the two things.
No, you can't. I think this is the very essence of what I'm saying. You can't divorce the two things. You can't say, I happen to have certain beliefs, this is what I think the way human beings should relate to each other, but now I'm a conservative, and I must put all that apart. You can't do that.
So politics is a moral calling.
Of course.
When you left university, we referred to this earlier a little bit, you became an entrepreneur, very successful, property, then into magazines, one sort or another. Did you absolutely deliberately set out to make a fortune? I mean, were you determined to become very rich?
I like the idea.
I mean, you didn't become very rich, you nearly became bankrupt at one point. It was a very
horrendous,
terrible period.
It was horrendous. I mean, that was forging in the fire. There's never been any other experience like that in my life.
That has left scars?
I don't know about scars. I would have said strengths. I think that is more accurate. The scars in the sense that one remembers and therefore sympathizes with people starting their business, and in a sense makes you rather tetchy about people who aren't aware of the strains of the entrepreneurial system and its disciplines. But strengths much more, that if you can come through that, if you can keep your nerve, if you can pay your bills, if you can tell the truth, and you can keep the whole show on the road to pull through, you have a confidence. I have no doubt that it was a strength with which I emerged from that process.
There was one particularly traumatic moment, wasn't there, where you had to hand over the keys of your car, the deeds of your house, any shares you may have had, to your bank manager.
And the
Many
watch.
people might have just walked away from their debts at that point and gone bankrupt. You didn't. You acted.
The banks advised me to do that. They said they're not personally bankrupt. They advised me to put the companies into liquidation, some of the companies into liquidation, and I refused to do that because I wanted to go into politics, and I quite frankly said to myself, if I run away from this when there's a slightest chance of pulling through and paying the bills, how will I ever look anyone in the eye again when I make political statements? If I ran away, I wasn't prepared to do it, and I've always been profoundly grateful, immensely grateful, to a man called Galpin, who was I think, Assistant General Manager of the National Westminster Bank on that lonely December the 23rd, 1962. I remember it well, when I went to see him, and I told him the truth. I think this goes back partly. He believed what I was saying. I told him the whole truth, how awful it was. I told him how I thought we'd get through, and I told him that I wanted to try. And he said, "What have you got?" I said, "I've got the car, I've got the watch, I've got the house." He said, "I'll take all that." And he gave me the money, and a quarter of an hour later he retired. And then we had Christmas, and immediately after Christmas I got a phone call from his successor, rather white-faced, ashen, as he looked at the files, and he said, "You mean he agreed to this?" I said, "Yes, he did agree to it, and I will deliver, and of course I know you will as well." And he did, and they got paid back.
That's all in the past now, and you're now a very wealthy man. What effect does that wealth have on you?
I think it has basically two significant things. One, very personal. It allows my wife and my family and myself to enjoy the enormous privileges of looking after a very lovely house and to collect wonderful works of art. But there's another, and not in any way to be discounted. I couldn't have survived those 4 years on the back benches without the independence of having created a financial base.
I think you've said yourself that you're not a very clubbable person. Are you in essence a loner?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that you go from one extreme to the other. Being a loner is someone who really has no need for other human companionship, which that certainly is not true with me. But I don't seek a wide circle of acquaintances. I don't spend a lot of time on what you might call the sort of cocktail circuit. I think that is the essence, really. That I've worked very hard. I've done the jobs I've been given. I have not sought to embroider that part of my life with a large casual acquaintanceship. I'm not very good at it.
Because they bore you?
I'm not good at it. I'm not at ease in the chit-chat world. Very important. I don't in any way disparage those who are, and it plays a role, but we all have different roles to play. That's not my role. And certainly one of the things that people always said about me, and it was true, that when I left the government, I didn't have a great reservoir of friends in the House of Commons that were there to sort of come to my support, whatever good that would have done.
Critchley says the key to understanding you, and arguably he has better claims to understanding you than most, is your emotionalism. Michael is a Celt.
There is undoubtedly an element of that within me, and I don't run from that. I think that's something to be rather pleased about, rather proud about, because after all, if you're in the business of politics, politics about people, and caring about people, and being involved in trying to help people, very, very important. And it isn't just a clinical academic judgment. There has to be a warmth about it. If you want to communicate with people, you want to persuade people, there has to be this personal relationship. If you can do it on a personal basis, that's one thing. If you can do it to an audience, that's another.
At some points, perhaps, though, you may have regretted that terrific vibrancy, emotionalism. For instance, that famous episode of The Mace, which is constantly quoted by your critics against you, that was clearly a moment where your emotions got the better of you.
I think that those who know and are interested in knowing as opposed to hiking it up would take a rather different view. It's one of the things that I didn't discover for some time. I knew exactly what happened on that occasion. I didn't wave the mace. The Labour Party had cheated to get legislation through the House of Commons, and they all leapt on the benches and sang the red flag. And this was the Mother of Parliaments. They had cheated, and I picked up the mace. I shouldn't have done it. I picked it up and offered it to them. It was a very controlled gesture. People who subsequently have come forward and said, I was there, I never understood why people suggested you'd waved it. We never did. We saw what happened. I didn't come across such people until fairly recently, but I have recently. And if anyone really thought that that was an emotional gesture out of control, well, they were the people who would never have made me Secretary of State for Defence. If anyone seriously thought that, you think through the implications of what ultimate powers there are in the hands in extreme circumstances of the Secretary of State for Defence. Nobody would ever have put me in that position.
What about this next episode, which is also often cited, the Western, when you walked out of Cabinet? Many people felt that was also an emotional reaction to a very difficult situation.
Those who wanted to felt that, who were determined to defend the other side of the argument, of course, presented it like that. It was the least emotional thing that I ever did. It was the culmination of 5 weeks in which I did everything within my gift to try and stay within the Cabinet. There were rules. When the rules were broken, I folded my papers and in a quiet voice left. Norman Fowler, in his recent biography, he was sitting alongside me. He records exactly what happened. It was one of the saddest and most controlled things I ever did, but it had to be done. And whilst I have regretted it hugely, I've never doubted it was right. And it was right.
You had no intention when that Cabinet began, though, of walking out, had you?
No, because it never occurred to me that the events that took place in that Cabinet would so unfold. But once it was apparent that unfold they were going to, with all the implications for me as Defence Secretary, there was no choice for anybody who has some sense of understanding as to their own personal integrity, as to their prospects of ever being able to carry credibility again, who had any understanding of what would have happened if I hadn't stood firm on that occasion. No, that was not an emotional judgment. That was a sad, rational, lonely, but utterly right judgment.
You yourself have said, quoting, "He who wields the dagger never wears the crown." You Did you realise that at the time when you stood against Mrs. Thatcher, that you would never become Prime Minister because of that?
I always had great doubts about whether I ever would, but there was no point in getting involved for me in this sort of analysis. The press, over 4 years, were determined that this was the ultimate conflict. Whatever I said would have been disregarded, and I don't blame anyone for that, because we all know that you cannot foresee absolutely every conceivable circumstance. And so my view was absolutely clear. It was much better, from relatively early days, to be quite frank. Say, look, I'm as ambitious as the next man. They're all ambitious. Every one of them, if they see any chance of preferment, will take it. I admire that. I respect it.
Again, there are those who say that actually you made a very unwise choice, that the whole leadership would have fallen into your hands if you'd only waited. And that by striking so soon, you lost it.
Isn't it curious? Those are the people who accuse me of being ambitious and scheming.
Do you have any remaining ambitions?
Yes. To serve the Conservative Party to the best of my ability.
As leader?
Oh, don't be silly. This is where it all starts. You know, we've resolved that issue. I will serve John Major in any capacity he offers me to do. I will do the job. Do you know, the interesting thing is, Adam, I'm now being egged up by the press in order to start adopting a higher profile. The moment I do it, we know what they'll do. Exactly what you do, trying to suggest that there's some purpose in it all. What I've been trying to do is to make a success of the Department of the Environment. I think we're doing that. I think some very exciting things have happened. Poll tax has gone. Dramatic new opportunities in rebuilding the urban areas. Our environment policy is playing a role on the world stage. That's the task he's asked me to do. That's what I'm doing.
Would you not like, though, you've always served in departments which arguably are not actually at the centre of your interests.
That I asked to go to the Department of the Environment this time. I thought there was a huge job to be done there, and I'm thrilled to be there. I've got a marvellous team of ministers, very exciting issues we're addressing. It's for John Major to decide what else he wants me to do.
Michael Heseltine, thank you.
Thank you.
Next week, Harriet Harman talks about her pursuit of power. That's next Sunday at 4:25. Humour and heartbreak, triumph and disaster, the lives of the rich and successful at work and play. Family Pride, a new serial, starts in 5 minutes here on Channel 4. And that's after an update on the latest news from ITN. That's next, here on 4.
Brooke Bond D.
For a full flavour, Brooke Bond D sings out.
Brooke Bond D. Brooke Bond D.
For a full flavour, Brooke Bond D. Everyone's cup of tea.
Anytime you choose.
It's on the M4 or 4 mile till
Kick off your shoes. What?
Put the purple in, will you? Hello? Don't tell me. He's tall, strong, responsible though. Doesn't mess around. Am I right? What?
Persil liquid in a reclosable carton. Less packaging, less waste.
Ah, Mr. Blake. What have we been up to recently? That's direct, that's good, eh? Now then, if you could just open... Oh, well, that's very snazzy. Now then, if you could just open wide for me. Oh, yes.
And because they're open 24 hours a day, I can call them whenever I want.
Meet a First Direct customer and you'll know all about it.
Yeah. One phone call, all goes to sight. Never known banking like it.
Let's go in here.
Certainly. I've got a yen for a pint.
Honey boy, pipe the pipe.
Got some rock, love.
How about 2 stars?
Rock and roll.
Lento glenga.
Sayonara.
Walking down the road, looking for a place to hide.
Very groovy.
Don't be snarky. Ha! Snarky!
Wherever you may wander, there's no taste like stones.
To colour, waterproof and protect your exterior wood, you can't do better than this. Ronseal Quick Drying Wood Stain. Ronseal has been proven to last twice as long as any ordinary wood stain. And Ronseal Wood Stain is so quick drying, it's rainproof in just 30 minutes and you can finish the job in a day. Ronseal Quick Drying Wood Stain. Done in a day, lasts for years. Ronseal brings home the beauty of wood.
A cool taste of paradise. Real cream ice cream. With tender, luscious coconut. 1,000 flakes, snow white, snow cool. In a real milk chocolate shell. Bounty ice cream paradise.
Just jump to it and get a fabulous new Rover Metro with 0% finance from Halifax Autocars, your local Rover dealer in Calderdale. So make that just jump over to Rover quality now.
You're watching Channel 4, and now the latest news summary from ITN with Sue Carpenter.
Good afternoon. Last-minute efforts are underway to rescue Yugoslavia from civil war as the breakaway Republic of Slovenia continues to defy a federal army ultimatum. The EC has told Yugoslavia that it will freeze all aid unless the federal army agrees to a ceasefire, and it's given Slovenia till 6 o'clock tonight to suspend its declaration of independence. A second European Community mission is going to Yugoslavia to try and salvage the truce they arranged on Friday. Air raid sirens sounded in several Slovenian cities this morning as Yugoslavian warplanes flew overhead. Here, Labour says the Prime Minister John Major's proposed Citizens' Charter will do little to improve public services. The party says a leaked copy of the White Paper, due to be published next month, shows it will be toothless. The attack came as 2 opinion polls out today showed Labour's lead over the Conservatives slipping to 1 or 2 points. A prominent loyalist murdered in his Londonderry home in front of 2 RUC detectives last night may have been the victim of a revenge attack. Cecil McKnight was a member of the Ulster Democratic Party, which has links with the loyalist paramilitary Ulster Defence Association. It's thought the attack may have been in retaliation for the loyalist killing of a Sinn Féin councillor in the Irish Republic last month. A United Nations mission has arrived in Baghdad to warn President Saddam Hussein he risks military action unless he allows nuclear equipment to be inspected. The United States has warned Iraq that force might be used if it continues to stop UN inspectors looking for evidence of nuclear weapons material. Sport and in athletics, Britain has retained the Europa Cup in Frankfurt after the Soviet Union's 400 metres relay team was dramatically disqualified from the last race. The Soviet team has protested. And that's the end of this summary. The next news from ITN is on ITV at 6:30. Good afternoon.
And now the weather. The southeast of England will stay cloudy and damp overnight, and much of Scotland will have rain at times too. In between, showers will continue to affect western coastal areas, but in the east it should become dry, and there could be 1 or 2 fog patches later. Tomorrow it will be a showery day in most places, but eastern England will start bright and mainly dry. Some of the showers could turn quite heavy and thundery later. Northern Scotland, though, should become brighter and drier during the day, and temperatures everywhere will be similar to today's.
Cosby Show, Sundays at 6:30 on Channel 4.
This is the best elevator music I've ever heard.
This is Channel 4 and episode 1 of a brand new serial, Family Pride.